Okay. Um, my name is Melva Big Swan. Um, I'm from I'm a member of the Kwantlen Nation in southern Alberta. I live and work in Calgary. I work out of my home. I do independent accounting, bookkeeping, and tax prep work. I service mainly Indigenous clients in southern Alberta. Um, I have clients all across Canada. Um, but keep in mind that I've worked as a financial controller for two First Nations, one in Alberta and one in BC. Um, I have an understanding of how funds flow in and out of a band, and all the different departments and obligations the bands have in terms of fulfilling their obligations under the contribution agreements they sign with Indian Affairs. I call them Indian Affairs because they change their names so often that, if I say Indian Affairs, everybody knows, who we're talking about. Um, and the other you have to keep in mind that you'll have a lot of questions about some of the things that are reported in your financial statements. And in order, I won't have the answers necessarily because some types of questions have to be answered by people involved in management at, within the band at some level, so I'll do my best to help you understand um, the financial statements and also all the information that's contained in the file that you're looking at. It's a year-to-year comparison at March 31 of your band's balance sheets from 2017 to 2022. All of this information is in the public domain. It's available online under the First Nations Transparency Act. You can go to the Indian Affairs website and find it there. You can just open up Google and search Kwantlen First Nation financial statements, and it'll eventually lead to this information. What I did do is I downloaded the financial statements for for all the way back to 2015. What you're looking at here is a year-to-year comparison from 2017 to 2022. So I basically took the balance sheet information and put it into a spreadsheet so you can see 6 years all side by side on one page. So we can start by going through, I guess, the information for 2022. I can explain the assets, what I understand, what the assets and liabilities likely are. We can look at the notes to the financial statements that are part of the audit report. And but there again, I mean, it's a lot of general stuff, there's no specifics here, there's no details. You have to contact the band management, the chief and counselor, the band management, to ask some, more specific questions. So with that, I don't know, Robert, does anybody have any questions so far?
So I'm just waiting to see if anybody wants to volunteer one. If not, so let's do just a general walkthrough of this, and then I'd like to come in with some questions about, how much money do we have, what our debts look like, and all that kind of stuff, and then eventually move on to remuneration.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So on the sheet that you're looking at right now, first of all, if you don't have a background in accounting and you don't understand what a balance sheet is, a balance sheet lists the total assets of the band. We're looking at a consolidated statement of financial positions. So it's a consolidated balance sheet for all of the band's entities. It's a list of assets that the band has. It's a list of liabilities, which are loans the band has, and then finally the net equity. So the last column is 2022, the most recently reported year. So, okay, we'll just start by going down the list there of financial assets in 2022. So cash on hand, this would be the total of all the cash the band has in deposit accounts, checking accounts, term deposits, those types of things. And that would be a total of $4,449,631. And also, the other thing I should note is that this is a snapshot in time. This is all of these numbers are a snapshot in time on March 31st in these respective years. So on March 31st, 2022, the band had $4,449,000 in the bank, spread out probably over several accounts. Short-term investments would be, I mean, it could be term deposits. As a general rule, anything that's reported on the balance sheet as a short-term deposit or short-term investment is something that would be expected to be converted to cash or at your disposal within the current accounting period or within 1 year, within the current fiscal year. So there's $3.4 million sitting in short-term investments. Accounts receivable is money that has been committed to the band and is owed to the band, has not been collected, but is expected to be coming in because it has been invoiced or it's due from, from a government source because it's part of a contribution agreement and it's funds that haven't been paid to the band yet. We don't know exactly the details of that. When I look at the consolidated statement of the band's financial position and for March 31st, 2022, and I look at accounts receivable. Just a second. Okay, so there's a note. It says note 3. So when I go to note 3, somewhat of a breakdown there, but it's not very specific, and in fact it poses more questions than it answers. And Robert and I we've looked at this already. So yeah, so for 2022, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I'll try and put it in view there. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a breakdown. No, you can't. There it is. But anyway, it's trade receivables, 3 million, member loans, 194,000, other receivables, 4.7 million, and CMHC subsidies receivable, $7,200. So the bulk of this is other receivables. And as I mentioned earlier, once I looked at this explanation, it posed more questions than it answered. It's, other receivables, what is that? I don't know. It would take, we'd have to depend on somebody who was involved in bad management at some level to make that determination. $194,000 is member loans, I guess, loans to band members. Trade receivables, $3 million. Yeah, I don't know. You'd have to ask your band management. Trade receivables typically are situations where you've invoiced under some kind of trade arrangement, whether you have customers for goods or services, and that much remains outstanding and hasn't been paid yet. So that's the breakdown of the $8 million in accounts receivable under 2022.
Melva, may I just note that when we're talking about having $8 million in receivables, the corporation itself, it seems like our most generous estimate is that it only makes about $8 million, I think, a year. So that accounts receivable is equivalent to the total revenue of the corporation for a year. I think when we looked at
Okay. Yeah,
Revenue, I think that was, can we look at that number again, the revenue number?
sure. Yep. Let me just get to that page here.
Sure. Because it just occurred to me now that oops. Those numbers, the actual revenue number is quite close to the invoice number.
Okay, so yeah, if you go to page 5 of the consolidated financial statements. Contracting services, well, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first 6 line items are right up to where it says negative 46,000. Those are the government agencies, and that revenue is likely just money committed to the band for program delivery. Okay, so right under there is contracting services, 5.8 million, and I don't know what that is. That would be a question for the band, and there's no note for that. If there was a note, it would say so right beside it. It would say note 8 or whatever, you know, but there's no note for that. That would be a question for your band management.
And then next to that, we have commercial and lease income, 2 below.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's certainly from the corporation. And then below that, we have other income at 568,000. So in total, that comes to $8.4 million. And that seems to be, from what I could tell here, this is all the corporate income is listed here. Basically. And these are the only 3 items that that we could call corporate income. Well, that plus merchandise sales, which is nothing. So from that $8.4 million of corporate income, we have, in addition to that, $8 million in receivables, in mysterious receivables that aren't listed.
Yeah, well, you know, the thing is, and this is experience from working with bands. A lot of times the way the funds flow from Indian Affairs or any CMHC or you know, the health department, FNHA. So, you know, these government agencies will commit funds to the band, and at the beginning of the year they'll advance a certain percentage, you know, so the band can begin operating. And so the band has to follow through by reporting and accounting, you know, filing reports with the funding agents, show where the money has been spent. And then, you know, the money continues to flow based on how it's been spent. So a lot of times at year end, all of the money from the funding sources has not landed in the band's bank account yet. At March 31, there could very well be, still be, you know, 20% of the total commitment outstanding. You know, they're waiting, they filed the reports, but on March 31, but by the time these financial statements were finished and prepared, the money had come in. But remember that this is a snapshot in time on March 31. So.
And what page? So what page shows the this $8 million thing?
Oh yeah, it's note 3, and that was on page.
Here it is, page 12.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So when we're talking about the receivables from government things, that could form part of the $8 million. That could form as much as, you know, 4.7 million of it.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. CMHC, they've separated out. That's only $7,200. Member loans, 194. Other receivables, yeah, a big chunk of that could possibly be due for MINAC at the end of the year end. You know, at the year end, we don't know.
But ultimately, we have a corporation that does 8.4 million in gross revenue that has $3 million outstanding in trade receivables.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, is that normal to have that much at one given time?
No, I don't think so. No, because I mean, it depends on what types of goods and services are being marketed. I mean, you know, where you're marketing goods, typically you'll turn over like 15 inventories per year.
Mhm.
So, you know, if you take the total revenue and take the $8 million in revenue and divide that by 15, what does that come out to? Let me figure that out right here. So,
530,000.
yeah, you know, it would be a little unreasonable to have 6 inventories still, you know, you're still waiting for payment for up to 6, and, you know, no, I don't think so. I think that's a little bit big. That's a
So,
little too large.
which sort of connects to another issue that we see with the band's finances. So with the band's finances, notice that we have this number here restated. Can
Mhm.
you explain what that's about?
Yeah, well, I noticed that in the band, well, I mean, the band will report numbers on their income statement, their consolidated income statement, their, you know, and it's broken down by department. If you go further back into the report, you know, it, it's it it's broken down a little bit. Um, if they find that there had been errors um, in the prior year, they'll restate it when they're reporting the current year. So it's really unusual to, I mean, sometimes it'll happen. You'll find out that, oh, um, you know, surplus wasn't actually this, it turned out to be this because, um, you know, for whatever reason. But it's irregular. I mean, it's not something that happens because I mean, the auditors they're verifying the financial position of the band on
Mhm.
March 1, and it's highly unusual to have to restate financial statements from a prior period. So, yeah, and I noticed,
So go ahead.
yeah, it's happened for the last 3 years, I believe, where the prior year had to be restated. And the difference was, I was, I didn't get around to, I didn't get to doing the comparison of the originally reported amounts to the restated amounts because they changed the format of reporting, I believe, in 2020. So jumping from 2019 to 2020, it's very different. You can take a look at them. You can see how they report revenue and expenses between the 2 years, and there's no way we can do a comparison because they're reported entirely different. So um, we'd have to get assistance from the band to do that.
Okay. Now, so basically what we're seeing is that there are many errors in the financial reporting year after year after year. And that we're also seeing that the financial reports are coming in late every year.
Yeah. Yeah, if you look at the you can pick, you know, go back a few years. Look at the letter from the auditor at the beginning of the report. They're always dated. Okay. So
Sorry, Carmen, just so you know, your mic is on and it's sharing it.
okay, so for instance, the financial statements for March 31, 2021, these are due, they have to be under the terms and conditions that of the funding agreements that the band has with Indian Affairs. They're required to be submitted to INAC by June 30th each year. So, I mean, the rationale is, you know, the band has 3 months to close up the books, have the auditors come in and do their thing, prepare the final reports, have them approved by council, and then have them submitted to INAC by June 30th. But the March 31, 2021 statement wasn't finished until February 22nd, 2022. So that's very late.
And this one for 2022 wasn't done until November.
Right. Yeah.
And so as a consequence of that, I mean, what is the consequence of getting it in late?
Well, in terms of like the band, the funding agreements the band has with INAC, the band, INAC typically won't release funds to the band until they've received the audited financial reports. Ideally, the INAC is going to advance money to the band anyway at the beginning of the fiscal year, especially in areas of social development, education, and health. I mean, those are statutory funding areas. Money has to flow for those operations. So they'll advance the money to them, but the band has to file reports, and they have to submit their audited financial statements. If they don't do that, the Department of Indian Affairs will withhold funding, until they receive these reports. So that's been my experience in the past. I don't know that has changed. It's been some time since I've worked as a financial controller for a First Nation, but in my 12 years experience working for two separate bands, that was always the case. And yeah, I mean, it means the band, they're either losing interest income on deposits, or they're incurring interest expense for short-term loans like lines of credit to keep operations, flowing, to keep everything moving smoothly and money flowing out.
So in other words, because the reports are late, they're being cut off by Indian Affairs, and so they have to borrow money. And when they borrow money, then they're not making money on interest in the bank, and they're paying interest on loans that they have to take out in order to make up the money Indian Affairs didn't pay. And
yeah, well, if exactly that. I mean, if the band doesn't have, other cash on hand, make up that, to bridge the gap, right? They're going to have to borrow money and incur interest expense.
And so that's very likely that number that we see here, the $639,870 number.
Yeah. So yeah, the bank indebtedness amount is, well, let's look at note 8. So if we scroll down to page 14, it says the nation carries operating lines of credit with BMO, Bank of Montreal, that are secured by general security agreements. The operating lines entitle the nation to borrow a combined maximum of $2.6 million that bears interest at a variable rate of bank prime plus 0.5 in 2020. As of March 31, 2021, $693,655 of the operating lines of credit were utilized, and the bank's prime rate was 2.45%. So yeah, they were basically $693,000 into their line of credit on March 31.
And that's at 2.45 or 2.7%.
Yeah.
So that costs about $20,000.
It's 2.45% per annum. So it would depend on how long it was. We can't really know for sure. If it was a whole year, that would be the case.
So somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 is the cost to band members for the report going in late, and that's every year for 3 years.
Yeah, it's fair to say. I'll say this about that. It's fair to say that it's likely that money from funding sources did not flow to the band for for quite a long period of time, because it took them so long to submit the financial statements. And so that might be cause for them to go into their lines of credit.
So, and when we look at the invoiced amount for $8 million, the $3 million for trade receivables, if the band is invoicing late and getting reports in late and getting work reports in late, then the corporation which the band controls it's not impossible that it's doing the same thing, which again is causing that backup and receiving revenue.
Well, yeah, that's possible. I mean, eh, yeah, I mean, it's possible that what's happening on this side is also happening on this side, um, and there again, there's no way to know for
Mhm.
sure without talking to band management. But the one thing that the auditors are required to do, um, under the terms and conditions of the contribution agreements that the band has with INAC, they're required to engage an auditing firm to come in and review the financial statements, but they're also required to provide what's called a management letter. Now, um, you can just Google that management letter, with a accounting with financial statements. What that is the auditors, because they've examined a sample of transactions in the process of doing their audit, they will have noticed certain things, or they may have noticed certain things. They may have noticed certain shortcomings, and they'll make recommendations in areas, such as internal control. They might say that they might recommend certain improvements in internal control. They might recommend improvements in record keeping, or all kinds of things. But the management letter will outline any concerns the auditors have as a result of performing the audit and having to look at the accounting records.
Okay, so in future, when we're looking at dealing with things like fiduciary responsibility, we could go back and look at those management letters and see if the recommendations were followed through with.
Yeah, yeah. But my experience has been that unless unless um, unless there's effort at the band level to review that and see, to mark progress, to compare, to check progress, it's not
Mhm,
going to, because the auditors don't check that the following year. There's
mhm.
no check, so to speak, you know. Um, but yeah, you can ask for the management letters. They're not posted. They're not posted under the First Nations Transparency Act. It's
Mhm,
more a tool for management provided by the auditors to band management.
mhm. Um, so if we can return to the comparison, the year-to-year comparison. Now, what I'm noticing is that cash and short-term investments, now that's just the money the band always has available. That's very consistent year after year, excepting the BC Hydro payment, but otherwise it's always around $6 to $8 million. So from that, what I can understand is that the band has decided that that's the amount of money it needs to always maintain, to always have available. So therefore, any fluctuation in these two numbers, unless it's really significant, we really shouldn't pay attention to. Would that be correct?
I think so. Yeah, because I mean, 4.4 million, I mean, that's spread out over a number of areas. It's not just, I don't know how the band operates, I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure it's spread out over a number of uh, departments, so yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about, if it's pretty consistent from year to year.
So what numbers will show change?
Uh, well, I mean, when you're looking at financial statements and you want, I, as an outsider looking in, I mean, I would just kind of look at this generally, then I'd see something that really stands out. For instance, in 2019, cash on hand was 23 million. So you go and you look at that year and you find out there was a huge payment from BC Hydro. The following year, it drops off sharply, but then you scroll down a little further and the investment line has increased to $17 million. So okay, obviously they took some of that and put it into an investment instrument of some sort. you
Mhm.
know um, it looks like they also in 2019 invested in business enterprises, you know, there. So yeah, I mean, you can pretty much tell what's happening on a general level by uh, you know, looking at a year-to-year comparison like this. You know, you can see, you can go back and look at notes, you can look at different things and get a good idea of generally what's happened, you know.
So when I come down here and this number here, the net debt versus financial assets,
Mm.
from what I understand, that based on everything else, this is the one number to look at that tells us the general state of affairs of the band.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so like in 2015, or sorry, 2017, um, the band had, you know, 12 million. Can you scroll up just a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so the band had, you know, $12 million in assets on hand, you know, some of it cash, um, some of it fairly liquid, or, you know, you're able to convert it to cash within a short period, except for, you know, the restricted assets, trust funds, interest reserves, replacement reserves, and such. Um, so $12 million, but their liabilities in that year were $22 million. So yeah, there's a net debt of $10 million. But keep in mind, a big chunk of that is long-term debt, which is likely, I mean, those are probably mortgages. There's probably, you know, if you've had housing projects and capital developments in the community, the bands had to borrow money through ministerial guarantees to finance capital projects, right? So, you know, they list the debt there, 13 million. So yeah, you're right. That number would be basically um, the financial position of the band, the net financial position of the band, excluding, you know, permanent asset, you know, other assets.
So if we're looking at that number, right now we're standing at a net value of the band of $16 million. If we subtract the BC Hydro payment, what's the financial position of the band?
Uh,
So I believe that was $24 million.
mhm. Yeah, well, I guess you'd be in a negative, the band would be in a negative position. But if you scroll up, can you scroll up? Um, it isn't $24 million anymore. Well, I guess in a way it is. I mean, because it's $20 million in investments, right?
Mhm.
The $4 million cash on hand, you know. Um,
But I guess the point that I'm getting at is without the $16 million, we'd be $8 million in debt, which is where we were the year before the payment came in.
right. Yep.
So then the change in our assets is, it seems like we've not moved.
Yeah, it's entirely due to the, you know, to the money from BC Hydro.
So in other words, the BC Hydro money came in and it balanced our books and gave us a little bit of cushion. And nothing has happened since then. And once we factor in inflation, that 24 million has actually ended up shrinking.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Inflation will shrink everything, right?
Yeah. So in other words, we got this big financial injection here in 2019. And at the end result, once we factor in everything with debts and all that, we're basically in this exact same financial position we were the year before.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
It's fair to say that.
so for the $24 million, it hasn't grown at all.
Uh, okay, scroll back up in 2022. Go back. Okay, just I got to move my little square thingy out of the way here because it's blocking view. Okay, so there's 30. Okay, in current assets, which is assets expected to be converted to cash reasonably expected to be converted to cash within one accounting cycle. In 2019, it's $31 million, right? The total. And then in 2022, it's 36 million. The largest increase being, that receivable, the accounts receivable, right?
So the mysterious accounts receivable.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, you're right. But the only amount, it's not 24 million on hand anymore. It's 20 million in investments. And yeah, because I mean, in 2018, they had $4.4 million in the bank. So you'd reasonably expect them to have at least $3 to $4 million in the bank at year end, right? So they have it in 2022, but the investment is down to 20 million. So there's, it's I would say the BC Hydro payment has, I mean, that has been reduced by $4 million for whatever reason, whether they've invested it or spent it, or I don't know. You'd have to ask band management. I don't know.
If I put $24 million in a savings account in 2019, how much money would I have now?
In a savings account?
It's a regular savings account at the TD Bank.
Oh gosh. Okay, future value of 24 million. And what is the savings account? What is the hold on a second. I will figure this out. Just a second here.
Okay.
Okay, so we're looking at
Van City has 4.5% in their high yield accounts. That's the local.
sorry, you said 4.5?
Yeah, that's our local credit union has 4.5% in their high yield interest account.
Okay, so 2020, 2021, 22, 23. So that's 4 years. Periods 4. Starting amount. 24 million. Interest rate 4.5. Oh, oops. I had 64.5 down for the interest rate. Hold on a second.
God, I wish.
Yeah.
Like Bitcoin.
Okay, so the interest earned at 4.5% per annum on $24 million after 4 years would be $4.6 million, $4,622,446.69.
So the total number in the bank would be
28.6.
So 28.6 million. So if we're trying to put a number on the value of the work the band has done in administering the BC Hydro money, it is minus $8 million, more or less.
Yeah. Yeah.
Could I interject here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, see, there's like the Lowry deal. We borrowed $25 million at the end of that deal, and they're paying us back over 20 years. So I don't see any reference to that in there either. And the Jackman Road job, Tilmia told me herself that we netted $22 million on that. So I don't see no reference to that in here either.
I should mention the lottery money is referenced in here. So we do see that the BC lottery payments are about $200,000 a year. But for the other thing, I don't see that anywhere.
Brandon speaking. May I interject as well? Robert, I think Victor is speaking about the Mercedes-Benz. Is it the DeLowry Auto Group? Is that what you're talking about, Victor?
Yeah, that's right, on the corner of
Okay.
Glover and the bypass in Langley.
All right, it's the auto dealership on Langley Bypass with the DeLowry Automobile Group. That's that Victor's referencing, not
it?
lottery.
Oh, okay, sorry.
They're the largest auto dealer in Canada.
Huh. Yeah, I don't see that anywhere.
And I don't see any reference to the Jackman. We didn't get it all, 22 million all at once, but that's what we netted from it. That's what Tumia told me about 2 years ago.
Mhm.
So, and I don't see where it's like, well, the Jackman Road would have been cash, but the expenditure from the DeLowry would be out the other end, right?
Mhm.
So, but I don't see the debt on here for that $20 million either, right? For the DeLowry.
Melva, could I ask, could any of
Okay.
those business or land sale deals, could any of them be the trade receivables that we're not understanding?
Okay, so are these situations where the band has surrendered land or has leased land?
No, it's a leased land, yes.
It's a
But
lease.
they surrendered land on the Jackman Road pit development. They built a whole bunch of houses, and the DeLowry was the DeLowry built their building on our property, and then we paid them out for what they put into it, and now they're leasing it back. Which
Okay.
is that was their deal that DeLowry offered, and it was, in my estimation, was a good deal, so I backed it.
Okay, well, that could be, I mean, if you go, okay, first of all, two different things to look at here regarding that.
Because that's a significant amount of money to vanish here, right?
So that sounds like the commercial lease income.
Yeah, it could be the commercial lease income. It could be that, or it could be other income or land management and development, or yeah. Yeah, it would have to be commercial lease income, other income, land management and development. Those three things could be part of that. But I wanted to point out something else, and this is something that used to, as a First Nations person and having worked as a financial controller for First Nations in the past, one thing that used to irritate me to no end was that I'm just going to see if it's in here. Manages. Here somewhere. Okay, so anyway, whenever, as a general rule, whenever the band, if the band surrenders land conditionally, like they do like a 99-year surrender or 49-year surrender, whatever it is, they surrender land conditionally. What happens is they surrender the land to the Crown. The Crown in turn turns around and leases it back to the band. So the band now has something of value. You know, Indian Reserve land has no value because it's protected. You know, it can't be encumbered. So to give that land value, the band will surrender it to the Crown. The Crown then leases it back to the band. Now the band has something of value, which is a lease on land. Okay. And so the band turns around and they lease that land, you know, to a third party, and they make money from that lease. That's how the band will make their money. Now, whenever the band receives income from the sale of lands or resources, lands or natural resources, and that could be natural resources can be timber, can be oil and gas, any kind of natural resource. Whenever the band receives revenue from that, that money doesn't go into their operating account. It has to go directly to a trust account in Ottawa. It's a capital account. And how that money is managed, it's held in trust by the Minister of Indian Affairs. And in order for the band to access that money, they have to sign a band council resolution requesting a withdrawal, and they have to have a proposal showing that they're going to spend that money on a capital project. So, the minister won't just release the money for operations, like day-to-day operations. Oh, we're running short of money this year for salaries and wages. We need cash. They're not going to release it for that. There has to be a proper proposal in place for some sort of capital project, something that's going to benefit the band for years to come, whether it's improvements to roads or infrastructure, or building a school, or something like that. Now, getting to what used to irritate me and bother me to no end was when the money flows into the band from the third party. Like, for instance, in Alberta, there we have a lot of bands that are that have leases to oil and gas companies. So when the money flows in from an oil and gas company for exploration, it goes into Ottawa and it's recorded as revenue. And then when we put a proposal together, withdraw the money, take it out of the Ottawa account, we have to record that as revenue from INAC, and it isn't revenue from INAC. We're just taking our own money and using it for something, right? But we're required to report it as revenue from Indian Affairs, and it is not, in fact, revenue from Indian Affairs. It's our money, So anyway, I just thought I'd share that, and that was something, and it's against generally accepted accounting principles. You can't record money as revenue twice, but we're required to report it as revenue from INAC in the year that they transfer it to us from our account. So thought I'd put in there. So it's quite possible that the money that flowed in for whatever lease you're talking about is sitting in a trust account in Ottawa. I mean, and that should be evident on the balance sheet.
And what we can see from our trust account, though, it's quite small. It's 170K this year.
Okay, well, then that's not the case, then. It's not there.
No, it has to be that commercial lease, the $2 million.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Is there anything else that we should look at on the sheet? So we have the net financial assets. Currently it's 16 million.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else that we should look at here?
No. I mean, no, I don't see any drastic anything else of note. I mean, and even if I did, I wouldn't have an answer for it, I wouldn't have an answer as to, what caused the I don't see any extremes. No, nothing.
What about remuneration? Can we take a look at that now?
Sure. Okay. Well,
So,
that's a contentious topic, right?
keeping in mind there's 69 residents on reserve.
Mm-hmm. Well, my band has we have a population of 4,000. I think 2,800 are on reserve, and the remuneration of our chief and councillors are comparable to this. It looks exactly the same, pretty much. So I mean, we can make that comparison.
So 20 times higher.
2,800 people.
Yeah. Were you able to look at neighboring bands as well, their remuneration?
No, haven't had a chance to do that. No. Neighboring bands to Kwantlen or?
Kwantlen, yeah.
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, so the nearest neighboring bands are Matsqui.
Okay.
And Catesy. So if we look at Matsqui and their
Okay.
financial report,
Yeah,
and their population is very similar to ours. So they have 97 people in reserve.
okay,
And their remuneration is for the same year.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
So what are we looking at here? For chief, it's 36,400.
yeah, it's about a third of what yours is.
Yeah.
So well, I've noticed that too. Like, I mean, in BC, I mean, I've seen huge, huge differences in bands with similar unreserved populations. I've seen bands where the chief is, the chief and council meet like three times a month or something like that, and the meetings are always in the evenings or weekends, and the chief's main um, livelihood is something else, and so they're paid by meeting, and so they end up making, less than $30,000 a year from the band, you know.
Now, if
Um,
we look over here at our next neighboring nation, Katesy, with many more people on reserve, 300 people on reserve, 82,200 for the chief.
yeah, yeah.
And
$1,200 and other expenses, 544 total. Yeah, yeah. I guess it depends on what they do. Like sometimes, I mean, some bands, the chief will have another function. They won't only be the chief. They'll be, working in some sort of administrative capacity, which I don't think they should do. But I mean, that's just my opinion. But I mean, as a matter of practicality, sometimes, that's the situation. The chief will also be doing something else. And so it's their full-time jobs sort of thing.
okay, so if you had to sum up, just as I think we're coming close to a natural close here, and then we'll open for a few questions. If you had to sum up, what would you say is the current state of the financial affairs of the band?
Well, I'd say the band, I mean, right now, like December or March, as at March 31, 2022, the band's in a good cash position because they have $36 million in, um, you know, fairly liquid assets, right?
Mhm.
Um, and their financial liabilities are, far below that, so their current ratio of assets to current assets to current liabilities is, I mean, they're sitting in a good position at March 31, but it's when you look back at what happened, it's entirely due to the influx of cash from BC Hydro in 2019.
Mhm.
Because the bulk of that money is the $20 million sitting in investments, which likely was transferred, is the BC Hydro money transferred into an investment instrument of some sort.
So when we look at the underperformance of the BC Hydro money, when we look at the late submission of reports, when we look at the borrowing to cover cutoffs from ISK, when we look at all the interest payments the band members have had to pay because of that, when we look at the mysterious and unnoted $3 million invoice for trade receivables, putting that all together, what assessment would you make of the financial management of the band?
Well, I think it's lacking. It's lacking because I mean, the reporting to funding sources should be done, in a timely manner because the band is given dollars by the funding sources to cover those expenses, right? They're given money for administration. The financial statements, the book should be closed off, shortly after March 31. I mean, it takes, a month or so to pull everything together, make all the final journal entries, wrap everything up and close off the books. prepare the financial statements, get everything ready for the auditors, it should all be done by the end of June. It should, the financial statements, there's plenty of time. 3 months is plenty of time to do all that.
Mhm.
If everything's been taken care of properly throughout the year, you can't come in at March 31 and do a year's worth of accounting and expect to have it done by the end of June. It looks like they're likely behind in their record keeping
Mhm.
at March 31, or so they have to do catch up, and it takes months to do a year's worth of accounting for a huge operation.
And when we look at, so in 2020, when those numbers were submitted in January, so they were submitted 8 months after the close of the fiscal year.
Mhm.
And yet here we see in 2022 that even those numbers were wrong because they had to be restated.
Right. Yeah. 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 There's something. Yeah. Something's not right there. That, there's definitely something. There's shortcoming in the record keeping, the accounting and the record keeping.
So that's pretty much it from my comments and questions. Do you have 15 minutes for us to open it up for regular questions? Like, I'm sure
Okay.
that very, very short. So does anybody else have any questions or comments? Well, questions, and we'll save comments for elsewhere. So it's possible there might not be any questions. I can't see if you raise your hand, so you just have to speak up.
Well, if after people have had a chance to sort of digest all of this and, take a look at it, I don't know, you can, post them in the Facebook group or whatever, and I can take a look there in a week or so and see if there's any questions, and then do what I can do my best to answer.
Okay, perfect.
Brandon speaking. I did have I guess a question. Where in the document does it show honoraria?
Oh, it's not in this document. It's a separate
Okay.
schedule that's posted on the,
Online?
yes, yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay.
But I should say it's not posted online for us. So
Oh, okay.
we can't see it anywhere.
All right.
We were able to see it in past years, but it doesn't seem to be in this one.
Oh, wow. Okay.
No,
What about
it's not in there for 2022?
I don't see it. I thought there was a $94,000 honorarium note in here when we broke it down by segment. So let me just double check that here.
Okay. You might have to go back to the Indian Affairs site. You know how you went into the profile and then you went to, you click on the FNFA link.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's right there. So you go to the bottom there.
Yeah.
Schedule a room. Yeah, right there.
Oh, there's nothing on that one.
There's no.
No, there's just these three.
Oh, I see. Oh, so who are you trying to look at then?
Oh, the band issues an unusually high number of honoraria in a year.
Oh.
in addition to that, there was also a question that I had regarding the budget for meetings and events. Is that listed on the schedule at all?
Not on the consolidated page, not on page 5. The pages after that are the departments, the sort of like the breakdown for each of
Right.
for that breakdown of the total. So you'd have to go and look inside the document at the different department listings. So they have it broken down by department towards the end, and I believe that starts on page.
Yeah, so I'm looking at last year's.
Okay, meetings and events. I see it.
Yeah, this from last year is 142,000 on meetings. And honoraria last year, it was 76,000. So let's take a look at this year.
Okay.
We'll go right to the end.
So it's my understanding that usually, like under normal days of the week, that meetings and events and honoraria are tied together.
Yeah, well, in 2022, the amount reported for honoraria is $195,350.
What? Okay, what was that again? 195?
Yeah, go
Sounds-
back to page 20.
That's insane. They don't have that many meetings.
Oh, goodness.
Okay, so in 2021, it was 94,274.
And I should add, I just read it as 76,000 on the amount they reported that year. So
Right.
they restated it by 20%.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it's 195, and then the meetings and events amount was that increased by about $100,000 as well, because in 2021 it was 148,000. In 2022, it's 252,000.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, what? Wow. Somebody's getting paid a lot of money there.
Brandon, keeping in mind that they
Yeah.
also restate these the next year. In each of the last 3 years, they've restated them up in the following year. So
wow.
it's saying 252 now. When they
Yeah.
restate it next year, it could be 300.
Right. Okay.
It's the same for
So
honorary.
during the COVID year, 2020, what was the meetings and events what did they say they spent?
That's listed here. 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
148,000.
And how many meetings and events were there?
In COVID year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know for certain that there were no meetings during the lockdown. There were
Oh
no
my
meetings.
goodness. Okay.
There were no meetings that occurred in the summer months, during fishing season, during
So
canning
it's-
season. There
Okay,
were no
so-
meetings during the Christmas holiday. There was no meetings during spring break. And
Okay, the
so,
amount,
it just begs the question, well, how many meetings were there then? If they weren't meeting for 5 months out of the year?
okay,
How many
so
did they
the,
possibly?
Sorry, let's let Melva speak.
Okay,
oh, okay, sorry, I'm just, Robert, if you go back to the Indian Affairs website and pull out the consolidated financial statement for March 31st, 2021.
Yeah, okay, I'll go back. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah,
So March 31st. So that's the 2021, 2022. No, that's 2020, 2021.
2020, 2021.
Yeah, okay.
And go to page 20.
Okay. So this year covers, so from this fiscal year only covers about 3 or 4 months before COVID. And that was during the summer when there's nothing happening.
there were no elders meetings.
Yeah, okay. So here we are.
There were no fisheries meetings because they were all fishing.
Right. So Melva?
Okay, so yeah, okay, so go down and look at meetings and events for 2020. It's $414,000.
During COVID.
Well, 2020 is that's as of March 31st, 2020. So that was just the very beginning of COVID, right?
Right.
It started in,
Gotcha.
yeah,
November.
for-
20.
yeah, 414,000 at March 31, 2020, and then 148,000 for the following period, ending March 31st, 2021.
Okay. So the 414,000 is during governance consultation. So apparently they must have been paying themselves for that.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. That's one of those
Right.
questions for management. So my family is just coming in the door now, so don't mind the chaos behind me.
Okay, Brandon, do we have any other questions or comments here?
Well, I guess comments. I'm just concerned that, these numbers, when we when you compound the cost for meetings and events, plus the cost of honoraria, plus the remuneration of the 3 top officials, and we haven't listed top administrators in that calculation either. You know,
Mhm.
we're looking at about, I would say, if we spread it out over a 12-month period, and I'm being generous by doing that because they're not working full 12-month stints here, that Kwantlen is probably paying about, I would say, $57,000, give or take a couple $1,000 each month for meetings and events.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Well,
essentially those meetings are just you know, a lot of them are just quick in and out, where they come and they drum and they
Melva,
make
may
a
I ask,
speech and they leave.
Melva, may I ask, what is your nation?
Picani, Pagan, go to P.
Okay.
I think with Indian Affairs, it's PEIGAN.
PEI, nope.
Oh, PII. Maybe they've officially changed it.
PEI, Picani.
Yeah, box 70 Brockett. Yeah, that one.
Okay. And do they file their books? Not
I hope
everybody
so.
does. Not everybody does.
I used to work for them. Oh, see, look, not posted yet. What the heck?
Yeah. Okay, so your nation of 2,800 with
Mhm.
KPMG. So we're just looking for honorariums, chief and council honorariums. Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
And travel. Oh, that includes
There's, I know that's the 1.2 million. I know.
their wages.
Yeah.
Let's just find. So
The
where?
statement of remuneration, I think, is a separate link.
Mhm. And they report honorariums under remuneration. Well,
Yeah, they do. But it's a separate link. You have to go back.
Yeah. I'm just seeing what they
Yeah.
have for meetings. If they have that listed here somewhere.
I wonder if they have it reported in the same format. Oh, thank you so much. They brought me my decaf coffee.
I just going back to where I was going with my line of questioning and commentary. I had a little kid in the back.
Oh, okay. So they might, they probably report in a different format, Robert. That's why you can't
Yeah.
find what you're
Yeah.
looking
I'm spelling
for. But I will say this, and I've mentioned it before, and people don't understand that when the chief and council, when these audit reports are prepared, when your financial statements were prepared in your audit report, the chief and council do this because they're obligated to, because under the terms and conditions of the funding agreements they have with Indian Affairs and First Nations Health Authority and CMHC and all the people that provide money for social programming, they're required to submit a audited financial statement, you know, to their funding agency, specifically Indian Affairs, you know, because they're the largest of the. Oh yeah, see, there you go. Yep.
Yeah.
Look
So
at their travel.
they don't have a wage. They call it an honorarium.
Yeah, I don't know. It must be based on meetings. I was the financial controller there until 1998. So it's been quite a few years since I've been there. I don't really know the ins and outs of what's going on there anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just their wage, which is pretty much what Maryland's we're seeing on our reserve in terms of wage, but so they don't have a separate thing for honorarium. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, getting back to what I was saying, the auditors are engaged to verify the financial position of a band at March 31. So the financial statements are a snapshot, like you're taking a snapshot of the band's financial position on March 31. And the auditors are verifying, yes, these are the assets of the band. Yes, these are the liabilities. Yes, this is the equity. Okay. Yes, this is a fair summary of operations for the year. That's what the auditors are saying. And they're making that determination not by examining every single transaction of the year. They're making that determination by examining a random sample of transactions. Okay, so they've pulled out a random sample, and they've examined all the documents related to those transactions, and they've determined, you know, they make certain opinions based on their examination. Now, the type of engagement is for them to just verify the financial position of the band. Now, just because a band has completed their financial statements and completed their audit, doesn't mean they're in the free and clear, that there's been no fraud, there's been no theft. That's not the type of engagement that the auditors have been engaged to do. They've just been engaged to verify the financial position at March 31. They're being verified, they're being engaged to say, yes, the snapshot is a true picture of the band on March 31. If you want to have an audit where they're looking for fraud or theft, it's a different type of audit engagement. It's like, it's you know, commonly referred to as a forensic audit, but it's a different type of engagement where they're brought in and they do a different kind of examination. Okay, that type of examination doesn't happen in the type of audit that they're doing right now. The only way, so you know, what I'm basically saying is that they're not they're not checking to see that everything's on the up and up. They're just verifying the financial position of the band. They're making sure that they're reporting to INAC that yes, the program dollars were spent in the designated areas, that type of thing. So I'll just say that. Okay.
Right, and the kind of, I mean, if we're looking at any sort of misuse of funds, it's being done in plain sight. It's not really secret here. So we're seeing for every single man, woman, and child on reserve, the band is spending $5,035.35 on honoraria and meeting costs.
Yeah, if you do the math, I guess that's what it
Yeah.
was. That's what it works out to.
Yeah, that's a cheap year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so when we add that up, you know, it's $1 million every 2.5 years, more or less. So when we're thinking about how did that $24 million get so small, well, that's part of it.
Yeah, and the only way to know what the details are is to ask the band for detailed GL listings, because these numbers are summaries of you know, hundreds of transactions, right?
Mhm.
So a detailed GL listing shows every last little one, you know, and that's the only way to know the detail. I mean, typically they don't share that with, you know, with the public at large, because, you know, a lot of it's confidential, you know, or not necessarily confidential, but I mean, you know, if you're having meetings and events and you have elders and you're paying honoraria and you have, you know, drummers, you might see that, okay, yeah, some of those people were paid, you know, for their services. But I guess if you think it's excessive, then that would be a question you can pose to them and ask to see the details.
Okay, great. All right. So I want to think we're hitting up to the top of the hour here, so I should probably let you go.
Okay.
So thank you very much for your time. To the people on the call and the people who will be watching online, this will be posted online very shortly. And if you have any questions or comments, please submit them on the Facebook page. And Melva, you said you might take a peek at that in a week or so?
Yeah, I'll take a look in a week or so and see if there's any questions there, and I'll do my best to answer what I can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And keeping in mind that you don't have access to all the band's books, so there's only so much you can say.
Yeah, I only have access to what you see on the what's in the public domain. So yeah.
Okay, perfect.